Hello, hello. Welcome back to another monthly social media news roundup. My word, do we have a lot to share. So, Luann, hello, welcome again.
Hi, Andy. Great to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. So, I imagine we're welcoming quite a few returnees. We have
in the chat already.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, definitely light the chat up because we love it. So, yeah, well, basically, if you've joined us before, you're going to know the drill. It's a lot of information coming your way. Don't worry, you don't need to make every change that we're going to be talking about. It's just ideally to give you a load of context and insight to help evolve strategies as we go. So, and we've got kind of Luann, who usually speaks much more sense than me and spends a lot less time talking than me. So, yeah, thank you for joining again, Luann. So, this session's being recorded. Slides will be coming your way after this as well, so you'll get all of that goodness. So, with that, we've got well over 100 people on already.
Wow.
So amazing. So let's do it, and I'll start sharing straight away. And anyway, how are you doing, Luann?
I'm good. Yeah, sun shining. Doesn't it make us all feel better? And we've got a bank holiday weekend, so what more do we want?
Indeedy. So this is us. You've probably seen us before. So let's kind of do away with that, and let's crack on. We're going to dive straight into the data, and then we're going to go through, as we know, point by point of all of the updates that are happening on the social media networks. But let's dive in with the data. Hopefully you've got a cup of coffee or tea on the go. So our favorite report got updated just a few days ago. So this is the Q2 data related to social media use around the world. Two things I want to call your attention towards is the bit in the middle, which is social media over the last 12 months has grown at 13.7%, but that's 521 million new people joining social channels in the last 12 months. Utterly insane numbers. In numerical terms, that's the biggest jump that we've ever seen. So utterly massive, which now means 4.33 billion people across the world actively use social. What actively means is they use it at least once a month. And now that's 56% of the world's population. So now the balance has been tipped in that more people actively use social than don't. So utterly massive.
Slightly crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Is a bit. So that kind of usage then manifests across multiple platforms. So Facebook's growth, as we'll talk about, is kind of petering out a little bit, but it's still utterly massive. YouTube, real strong growth. That's grown nearly 291 million users since, for the last 6 months. So massive. WhatsApp has stayed fairly static. Instagram's been quite good. TikTok's starting to be on a bit of a march again because TikTok's growth flattened a little bit for the last 2 quarters, but it's really in the ascendancy again. They're forecast to hit over 1 billion monthly active users this year, which is massive. And then, as I always, I'm like a broken record on these things, talking about Pinterest, Reddit's growth, but Twitter is actually notable by its growth again. So Twitter's definitely gone up. So they're my takes from this slide, Luann, but you got any thoughts on this one?
It's interesting, isn't it? I love the fact that it is actually kind of active users that we're looking at the figures at, and not just how many people have set up. And people are starting to say this. LinkedIn's not on there, maybe because it is more of a focused platform, or B2B. It doesn't quite reach it. I think it's not far off getting on this slide, but it's not on there. But there are actually thousands of social media platforms, so it won't be far off. But very clear. I don't think the top spots change very often. For me, the order of these just shows the importance of video content as well as the different social media platforms that we can be using. The source of information, this comes from Hootsuite and We Are Social. You can just search to find it. They release this once a quarter, and a big annual report at the beginning of January as well.
Yeah, indeed. This is one of my favorite, albeit one of the nerdiest ones on this deck. I love it. They've presented this data in a slightly different way for this quarter. They've changed this first metric, but this is really important. And the main takeaway from this slide is like the importance of a multi-channel strategy. So unique to platform, as you can see, there are barely any users that are entirely unique to a platform. What that means is that if you're leading with Facebook, for instance, you're leading your content strategy on Facebook, then it makes sense to apply other channels into that strategy, because 76% of Facebook users also use YouTube, 76% also using Instagram, and then basically half using Twitter. So it goes to show like those users and the growth of social media isn't just about people just joining one platform and staying. It's about kind of them manifesting across multiple platforms. So, thinking about multi-channel in your approach is a really important one. And this slide really demonstrates that. And any further thoughts on that, Luann?
Oh, well, I don't recall LinkedIn being on this one before when we presented it. So I love the fact that that's on there as well now. So even though it wasn't on the first slide, I think that's really important to look at. Facebook also using LinkedIn 30%. So it is still there. So this is one to examine and see what it means for you.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really important thing about like B2B, because typically, B2B social media is like, oh, I'll use LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that case. It shouldn't be as simple as that. And this data absolutely, proves why it should.
Yeah.
You could distribute across more channels than those two for B2B. Now, looking at favorite social media platforms. So this is a new chart for this. Basically, the question is, if you can only use one social media profile, and what is the one that you go to and open first? Here, WhatsApp wins out, interestingly, and this kind of is backed up by some of the kind of research that you've been involved in, Luann, that I'll turn to you on that in a second. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting change, but you're going to start to see the trend of certainly like WhatsApp and Instagram. So when you're looking at what is the one single platform that you care about more than anything else, it's interesting to see how, TikTok's kind of 5th place here on this one. So we always talk about it, but is that everyone's first and go-to? Those favorite platforms then get split out by age and gender. Instagram wins out for females age 16 to 34. Slight change if we look at the male chart on the right hand side, where Facebook's preferred between 25 to 34, which is quite interesting actually. But then from 35 upwards, which sadly I'll put myself in that camp, WhatsApp wins out. And there's like Luann and I were talking just before we joined, is WhatsApp a social platform? I call it a private social network. They call themselves a social platform too. But yeah, it's a bit of a grey area, I would say. Don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Luann.
I think it's obviously in there because it's owned by Facebook. I wouldn't have put it into a social platform space. I guess it is because of groups. But I think it's my personal use of WhatsApp is when I know people and then add to a group for a specific purpose. I kind of feel like it's a bit too personal with my phone number to use until I, I've got some level of trust or relationship with people. And to be honest, I have my WhatsApp on mute most of the day. Exactly. But it's one that we should be considering or have in our mind, because certainly as far as what WhatsApp are doing around like a social commerce or an e-commerce perspective, they've done a lot with regards to that. Whilst it's not a typical platform we could take our message and distribute it on, there's quite a lot of opportunity that exists within WhatsApp. Looking at social media from a US perspective, because we've just been looking at global data, so it's nice to back this up with some other angles. So this is US social media growth. Things to note here, as is represented by the global trends, is that Facebook still is fairly flat. YouTube is absolutely in the ascendancy, as it continues to be. We'll talk more about YouTube in a second. Instagram is a really nice growth curve as well. And as you can see, WhatsApp in the ascendancy as well, driven predominantly by events of the last year and a half. So it's interesting to look at data from different perspectives and see that actually these global trends are being replicated in the US. But now they're also, backed up by something very specific in the UK. So Luann, this is your data. So this data comes from UCAS Media. If anyone's involved with student recruitment or universities, they have just released their new student lifestyle report, and a big section of that is social media use by potential students. So this is, it's a huge opportunity, not just for universities, but anyone targeting that kind of sixth form audience and the social media platforms they're using. Interestingly here that there has been a decline in how they're using Facebook over the last 5 years, 6 years of this, whereas other platforms have been increasing. Instagram is increasing. If you actually get to look at the whole report, what's also really interesting is social media use changes in the 3 or 4 years that they're at university as well, and the purposes that they use it for. So we've included this. It's from UCAS Media. You can download it from their website. But if you're involved in anything student orientated in terms of your audience, definitely worth a look.
Yeah, perfect. So So let's take the data and let's go into some trends. Social commerce comes up every time, and I'm not going to talk about these numbers here on the left-hand side because, yeah, you're able to read that for yourselves. But what I thought was really nice about this data, other than the fact that it's talking about the growth of social commerce and how the fact that we all know that the social platforms are orientating towards this, and social platforms as a whole are trying to kind of decrease their reliance on advertising revenue to drive revenues from other sources. A key part of that is social commerce, and ultimately businesses selling products directly through social channels. But there were kind of 5 key ways that manifests, and it's kind of useful to think about it in this way. So what we see is like buttons that redirect to online shops. So we'll see that within our social posts, shoppable posts and stories. You'll have seen that a lot if you've joined these roundups before. Every single month we're seeing a brand new like shoppable post features, like the way to link, have shoppable links, shoppable posts, for example. Ads obviously has always been a way of driving e-commerce sales. Peer-to-peer buying and selling. We're going to see this a bit more as we go through the changes and updates and the way that kind of peer-to-peer selling is happening. So Clubhouse have just rolled out a version of that, so we're going to get to that in a bit. And like social commerce and plugins, like Shopify has done a huge amount with Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest, as we'll see later on, to kind of make social commerce really easy, even for small businesses. So there's a lot of opportunity when it comes, if you're a B2C organization and you can sell products online, social commerce harbors a lot of opportunity, and there's going to be loads more coming from the social channels around that. And I actually wanted to give, I don't usually give case studies in this one, but I came across this one from Lush, the UK cosmetics brand. And I thought this was a fascinating example. They saw a 333% increase in conversion in the most counterintuitive thing I've ever seen. So here, someone's on a kind of a sales page about to make a purchase, but they've got this little thing called Spotted on Social, which they use an app to bring in like UGC, user-generated content, of actual people using the product. And they're seeing more conversions happening through people clicking on those images of individuals like themselves, looking at that and then shopping it directly on Instagram. So it seems so counterintuitive. You're taking someone away from a sales page onto social to make a conversion, but it just goes to show that kind of human element is becoming so powerful in the way that people buy products. And this is the kind of trend we're seeing change. So don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Luann, but I was well interesting.
I think that's a brilliant case study. I was attracted by the coffee to start with before I spotted the Spotted on Social. But I work with an FMCG product, and a huge amount of our content is user generated because people every day are taking photos and doing Instagram stories of them using the product, and everyone loves it and engages with it. And you know what, as a brand, when we go, wow, this is amazing, or thank you for using our product, they get so excited about engagement from the brand with their stories as well. So it's something that if you have this kind of product, get involved, because it doesn't, other people are doing most of the work for you. You just need to engage with it and use it.
100%. So YouTube, I talk about this fairly regularly, but like we've been seeing like YouTube in the ascendancy when we were looking at the data from lots of different perspectives. But like, how's this for a statistic? YouTube's popularity is especially high among 18 to 29-year-olds, with 95% of them saying they use the service. What an insane number. Of that age group, 71% say they use Insta and 70% use Facebook. So it just goes to show, like, that is such a incredible share of kind of attention on that platform. And honestly, we don't think about it enough when it comes to our social media strategy, certainly here in the UK. And it's very much, it's continuing to climb, even though it's, nearly 2.3 billion monthly active users. So I'm actually expecting this to start overtaking, this being YouTube, overtaking Facebook in terms of the largest social platform. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens by the end of the year. So
I'll make a note of that and we'll test it. We'll see. Exactly. We'll see. Remember.
There we go. Yeah. I might well be wrong, but we'll see. I'm happy to stake a claim on that. Yeah. I've got some data on this. I want to share it. I think everyone kind of that uses LinkedIn inherently knows this, but this is some data that breaks it up, that backs this up. LinkedIn hate links, basically. And the data says that posts without links get 6 times more reach than posts with links. And ultimately get 4 times more reactions and 18 times more comments than the average post with a link. The link to all of these data sources are contained within these slides, which you're going to get by follow-up. So yeah, I think it just confirms what we already knew. If you can avoid putting links on LinkedIn, please do, basically.
I kind of slightly have to disagree with that. Because for me, and yet someone's put that word in there that I very rarely talk about, is algorithms. And yes, we always have data, and it's great to have data and facts and guidelines. But do you know what, when it comes to, do you include links? Do you not include links? Do you include images? Do you not? Focus on your objectives. We both use LinkedIn to get people to sign up to this event. We had to include a link to get the signups. That was our objective. If we didn't, perhaps even half of you wouldn't be here. I don't know what percentage came from LinkedIn, but focus on your objectives rather than, oh, LinkedIn doesn't like links, what am I going to do? If you have an objective that involves around links, let that come first. And someone here has put, I just picked it up, can you put links in the comments section to get around it? Personally, I hate links in comments because it means that I have to go and do something else to find it. And if that post is getting lots of engagement, I can't always find the link. So yes, we see it in stats. We see it as, ways around and hacks. But as a user, I just go, oh, you're making me go and do something else. I want to make it easy for people that are reading my posts to click on it. I've got a webinar. This is when it is. This is what we're going to cover. Here's the link to register. Get it out there. Don't try and overthink and trick things to make things happen. Focus on your objectives first, then look at tips and tricks like this if they work for you.
I told you she speaks sense.
Sorry.
No, good. No, you're absolutely right. And that's the interesting thing. It's like we don't actually have to agree on all of these points. I always put my links in the comments, like bar none. Always do. And as I'm sure you know. So there is no right and wrong way. We just use the data. We make decisions as a result. So
do it and test it and see what it does for you and your audience and your brand, because it may work for you. I have a personal dislike to it.
There we go. So, and I think that pretty much demonstrates.
Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right, because there's no such thing as like there is no hard and fast rule book. We're all learning. We all have different preferences of things, and that is okay.
Yeah.
A spotlight on ROI. I pulled this out of some LinkedIn data where their contention was that marketers spend too long thinking about short-term results and don't analyze content marketing in the right way. And I looked at this and went, amen, because that is absolutely backs up what I believe. Honestly, what LinkedIn was saying is that the majority of marketers, certainly from paid campaigns, they optimize all of their campaigns within the first 2 weeks. And at that point, you're kind of just reveling in noise. Ultimately, content marketing takes a lot more time to mature. So the people that really spend the time and understand ROI look at it in a longer period, a quarterly or half-yearly basis. Content marketing is a long-term initiative, and LinkedIn's contention was that marketers spend too long trying to do like weekly or even monthly like KPI reports. Doesn't tell the full story of the impact of content marketing. So I thought that's really powerful. And I know a lot of businesses feel the pressure to constantly justify why we do content marketing, the results we get. And we have to always do kind of monthly reporting, but just having our minds that the opportunity to demonstrate the power of social or content in general through ROI is actually over a more longer term perspective. Does that make sense, Joanne?
Yeah, and I do agree with this one. I'm a big fan of ROI and measurement, but ultimately it comes back to my point on the links is it's about objectives, and you've got to set very clear objectives to start with. And my measurements are always, as far as they can be, against objectives, because as we know with social media platforms, there's so much data that we could pull out. We could do the most amazing presentations on followers and likes and impressions and fancy things, but if it doesn't relate back to an objective, if our content doesn't support that objective, then we could present any figure and it wouldn't actually mean anything.
100% agree. Yeah. See, we can agree.
Yes.
Podcasts. Podcasts are about to have their moment in the sun. As of, they've been growing consistently, and it's been a very gradual, slow burn with podcasts, which have been a niche thing for years, but they're absolutely in the spotlight now. And the reason I'm talking about it is because you might have seen that Apple Podcasts are starting to release a subscriptions opportunity where people can start subscribing to podcasts, and then Spotify are doing exactly the same. So that then changes the game for podcasters, where now they don't have to rely on advertising revenue or use podcasts as a tool to kind of, as just a content marketing tool. They can use podcasts as the end in itself, as the way you can drive money and monetization of your own expertise, because now you can actually start driving subscribers to your podcast through both Apple, which I think goes live next week, and then Spotify, which I can't remember when that goes live, but you're going to start to, as a result, see a lot more impetus behind more podcasts coming to market, that's for sure. So this actually follows a really interesting trend about like the monetization of creators and the monetization of content in its own right. So I think that's a really interesting trajectory for social in general. So if you've got
I've been really fascinated how podcasts have held up and grown over the last 12 months, because for me, they were something that I always listened to in the car and when I was traveling, and I haven't been anywhere for 12 months. I've done very few miles or journeys. So it's clearly, people are listening to them and it's grown. So I was fascinated by how well they've held up and how many people are moving towards doing them, which kind of, I know we're going to talk about, but is all about that way of consuming content, isn't it? And audio is what it's all about.
Indeed it is. Next week, the game is going to be changed slightly when it comes to our paid social advertising, as Apple's IDFA update comes to the fore. Basically, you're going to see this little, if you're an iOS user, of course, but if you open Facebook, you're going to see this message, and you're going to choose whether you're going to allow that app to track you or not. That's going to create a very interesting dynamic, because everyone will have seen all of the Netflix documentaries about social media and how people track you and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be the estimate from Facebook is that only 10% of people will opt into being tracked. Wow. What that means is that from a user perspective, you better get used to lots of untargeted ads and irrelevant ads. It does not reduce the amount of ads that you'll see. But as a business perspective, for anyone that's an advertiser on Facebook, what's going to happen is that it's going to drive up the costs of conversions and clicks and all the metrics as a result. So I don't have too much conjecture on what might happen, because we don't know, but it's going to be a very interesting one to watch. And this I pulled out from the report that you sent to me, Luann, actually, because I thought this whole pivot to private is actually a really nice title and a headline, and something that contextualizes what we saw in the data at the start of this presentation about how WhatsApp is in the ascendancy globally, and why people are turning to more private social media networks, potentially turning away from that broader feed interaction. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, this is always something really interesting. So again, this has come from the UCAS media report, so it's very focused on students. And it is really interesting, this use of private, and it's actually something that I talk about a lot when I'm working with people, particularly around LinkedIn, in that not everything you do has to be in the public domain. Yes, there are certain things that you want to comment on people's posts. Andy, you did a post this morning, webinar today, so of course I publicly commented on that. But there are very often occasions where you want to have a more private conversation. If I'd found a report, I'm not going to put that publicly going, oh yeah, and Andy, could you include this? Because that would be irrelevant to everyone else that's looking at it. I would message that one-to-one. So I'd very much encourage people to think about, not everything needs to be in the public domain. What we're actually trying to do is have one-to-one conversations to move it towards doing business together. So if you can use any triggers you see in posts in the public domain, pick them up personally, say, oh, I really loved your last post, I'd love to talk to you about that, your comment on this was great, let's pick up on that. You don't need to do everything in front of millions and millions of people.
Indeed, yeah, I'm with you on that. So right, we're about halfway through now, so that is all of the data and the trends. So now so I'm going to fire through Facebook. Luann's going to take over from the other networks, and then I'll pick up again. So let's go through, because Facebook have had a particularly busy month. So firstly, you can limit who can reply to posts. You would have seen Twitter do something similar a few months ago, but now you can start to post without fear of ramification of commentary, and now you can choose who can comment on posts. Ideal for brands that typically get a lot of kind of troll orientated posts and kind of unsavory commentary to it. So that can be quite powerful. Does take appreciate the irony of this, because it does take the social out of social a little bit, But if it makes social media feel like a safe place for more people, then it's good for me. You might have seen Facebook Analytics is retiring. It's not like you're not going to be able to get analytics in Facebook natively at all, because it's going to move. Some elements will go, but some elements will just move to Business Manager. Also, Content Cal released Advanced Analytics, which took all these metrics, so we could still present them back to individuals. So this is Content Cal's Advanced Analytics. So if you want to check that out, it's ready to trial now. Sticker ads are coming to Facebook Stories. As you can see, it's quite a nice little implementation of how you can start to advertise on Facebook Stories, just another ad format ultimately. In a rare moment of kind of transparency and usefulness, Facebook have allowed us to export all of our posts and notes and everything we've done on Facebook. We can take it to Google Docs and WordPress slightly randomly, but it's a great way of creating a kind of personal audit trail of everything we've done. And it's great for those that feel like if you've got valuable stuff that lives on Facebook and you don't know about the future of that, you might want to take that onto your own device. Facebook are changing a little bit in terms of the way that the newsfeed works as well, allowing you to opt in to certain topics. You would have seen this on lots of other platforms as well. It's quite a familiar experience, but now you can kind of it will suggest topics to you which you can follow, which means as a result, you'll be served content related to those topics. Better newsfeed experience. Be interested to see how this evolves into, does that increase the organic reach of certain pieces of content potentially? So it's too early to tell because they're just rolling this out. You might have seen this already because this is live. Facebook related discussions. This, if anyone runs a public group, Facebook group that is, then that Facebook group has some extra significance now, because Facebook are recommending some discussions that users might want to participate in. So here you'll see this related discussions, which surfaces conversations from other public groups. So this now really aids the discovery of group content. And for me, because Facebook groups has been core or been key to Facebook's strategy, which is all about driving engagement. Facebook is less about user growth at the moment, more about encouraging engagement and as a result, increasing the time that people spend on the platform. So they're seeing this as a really good opportunity to increase engagement. So good from a user perspective, but good from a business perspective, if we might run a public Facebook group. Facebook Hotline begins testing. Not sold on this name, if I'm honest. Sounds a bit seedy to me. But,
showing your age. Your age.
Quite possibly. So this is it's a little bit of a take on Clubhouse, but a slightly different approach. This isn't available for everyone. It's kind of private beta at the moment, but we got a bit of an idea of how it's going to work. So now, it's kind of like having a conversation that's happening between Nick and Nikita that we see on this screen here. We can see lots of other people that are participating in this discussion. People can ask questions can be upvoted, and as a result, asked to whoever's chairing that discussion. It's kind of like an ask me anything type of scenario. It creates a lot more structure to a conversation rather than like the typical approach if anyone spent any time on Clubhouse, which are naturally unstructured conversations. So it's a slightly different take. But like I say here, this is just one part of a 4-part audio strategy. So I'm going to show you the other 3 parts. Facebook live rooms, you knew this was going to happen. This isn't live now, but it's going to be very, very soon. This is basically their complete take on Clubhouse. Unstructured conversation, strike up a room, get people involved in it, have an audio-based conversation. This was really easy for Facebook to roll out because they rolled out Facebook rooms as a kind of Zoom alternative, at the beginning of the pandemic last year. Really easy for them to roll out. Basically, there's nothing you need to know because there's no difference in terms of the use of this compared to Clubhouse. Invite people, spin up a conversation, and get people interacting. Talking about audio, the third bit of Facebook's kind of assault on audio, Facebook soundbites. This is very similar to what Twitter did a few months ago, where they rolled out audio tweets, which should be available to all now. This allows for a slightly more, it's completely different content format, right? So you can use the power of the human voice to engage in a different way. Fantastic for accessibility and great because it's incredibly eye-catching. So different types of content, something else to experiment with alongside our video and audio, or video and images, for example. So really like the look of this. And then Facebook podcasts. So they've struck up a partnership with Spotify. We've been talking about podcasts already, but they're making it much more intentional and useful as to how you can market and drive traffic to your podcast, because you'll see in here in this kind of profile example where you've got a separate link for podcasts, and there's a now, rather than just sharing your podcast as a link on Facebook, now it's become much more intentional, and actually you can use Facebook as a home for your podcast. Facebook isn't becoming a podcasting platform like Spotify, for example, as a place of discovering it, but it has that really nice integration with it, which does make it far more useful. So that's the kind of 4-part approach that Facebook are taking in going towards a real audio first strategy. So that is Facebook. On to Insta.
A few, there's changes here as well, and we can fly through most of these. And when we put this presentation together, we always, when we set the date for the next month, we have no idea what we're going to include. I don't think there's anything big in terms of surprises or dramatic changes we need to make, but there is a lot of changes, and some of these I think we saw coming, like the first one. Next slide, please. There we go. Ads coming to Instagram TV. That's not a surprise. They launch something, they get people using it, get people involved with it, and then they monetize it. Why wouldn't they? It'll be interesting to see how they come through. Reels, someone did talk about Reels earlier. How are they comparing to TikTok? I don't have any stats on how Reels are comparing to TikTok, but I'm sure we will see some research coming out and case studies on that soon. But going back to that favorite social media platform slide, it would be interesting to know the context that people choose their favorite, because I've got a bit of addiction to watching Reels at the moment in the evening, because I've done Netflix. So I'm watching Reels, and this new remixing where you get people doing things side by side. Some of them are following dances, some are doing other things. I think that's going to be quite interesting, and more functionality coming in to Reels as well. As we know, the platforms are always working on trying to protect their users, misinformation, disinformation, those kind of conversations. Instagram in particular has worked on this harder than some other people recently, or talking about it more, that they have got new tools to protect from inappropriate behavior. Worth checking them out if you're experiencing anything, or if you're a parent and want to protect your children as well. They've got some functions and features specifically for that. Links, my topic of the day perhaps. Instagram are testing out a new link sticker in stories. So someone did comment, how do you promote on social media if you don't include links? Not everything needs a link. Sometimes we can just be sharing content or sharing images or something else. We don't need a link in everything, but it is useful to be able to do them. And interesting that links have only ever been in the bio for Instagram, or a swipe up if you've got that many followers. So interesting that they're adding this into stories, and to see how that comes.
Indeed. Apparently it's still going to be limited to people with north of 10,000 followers. So before anyone gets too excited of having another way of putting a link in the story, sadly it's still restricted to that.
Right. Ads coming to Reels, that's probably not a surprise either. I don't think that's far off, or is it already live? I haven't seen any.
It is. It should be around the corner, to be honest. So format's ready. Yeah.
This is an interesting one. The next slide, in that we don't often in these presentations talk about things that are being tested, but sometimes there's often reports of things that are being tested, and this is one that Instagram have talked about for a long time, about hiding like counts and why they're doing that. And they have a new test where you can choose whether you see like counts or not, or whether you're displaying them. So I think it's nice that users have that opportunity, and we'll just have to see how that plays out, who uses it, who doesn't. LinkedIn. So LinkedIn haven't made amends for a while, and then a big batch of them all come along at once, which is interesting. Not surprisingly, what's we got first? Not surprisingly, they are working on audio as a competitor to Clubhouse. Inevitable, really. It's now on the platforms. We'll see how that plays out. I'd like to see it in groups, and to reinvigorate the groups feature on LinkedIn in particular. I think that's where it would be most valuable, if they could be reinvigorated. That's a whole topic for another day. But these two features are the ones that are particularly interesting. I haven't added a video cover story yet, but you can do it from your mobile. If you log into the app on the mobile, you'll have a plus next to your profile photo. Now you can record a video cover story. If you see an orange circle around people's profile photos, then you know that there's a video cover story that you can go and watch. So that's really useful. Creator mode is something new, and I've switched my profile to this. There's a few options. It may not be available to you yet. It is, as with most features, rolling out. But what happens with creator mode is that your default would change from connect to follow. You are able to display up to 5 hashtags. It sits under your headline in the top of Luann talks about, hashtag LinkedIn, hashtag social media, and it gives more prominence to your content in terms of featuring it at the top of your profile. As I said, I've switched to this. I haven't, probably about 3 weeks ago, haven't seen any dramatic increase in terms of engagement or profile views yet, but I already had follower as my default over connect. So something to watch, but good to look out for and be aware of as well. Another amend, LinkedIn Live, again, still rolling out. If you haven't got it and you want it, you need to fill in an application form. You can find that if you just search for it. Sometimes they approve it next day, sometimes it can take months. So if you ever think about wanting to go live on LinkedIn, plan it ahead. They've made a small change now that when you go live on LinkedIn, it fills in at the top of your profile. It looks really cool. So it's at the top of someone's profile when they are going live on there. That's LinkedIn. A couple of people, are we reading out comments? We're going to go into the comments in a second. Yes, you will get a copy of the recording. I know we're covering a lot, so there is a recording that you will be sent. Let's have a look at Twitter. And again, not a surprise, audio coming to desktop. So they were quick off the mark in terms of the Clubhouse competitor feature. And again, Twitter has been making a lot of updates over recent months and adding it to desktop as well, which personally I'm a fan of because I do like to use things on a desktop over my mobile if I can. I find it a bit easier. So they are coming. I think you've been using Audio Spaces.
I have on the mobile at the moment. Yeah, and it's good. I prefer it to Clubhouse, but there's just definitely a long way to go. It was meant to be fully rolled out in April, but I'm guessing as there's 1 day left, they're going to miss that deadline.
Who knows?
Soon. Yeah. So
well, they've got 2 days, haven't they? Because they're still asleep. So they have got 2 days. Fleets is the next thing, the story equivalent on Twitter. I personally haven't worried about these yet. Or use them, but I do see them at the top of my profile every day when I'm looking on my phone. You can now add stickers, and on the next slide, Andy, you can add backgrounds to fleets as well. So they're just adding more functionality, but it's the functionality that we see on other platforms as well. Going down the monetization route, Twitter has been looking at this probably more openly than, we know the others monetize in terms of Facebook ads and Instagram ads, but Twitter has been looking at other ways to monetize, other ways to give different features at different levels as well. And it's interesting that they're launching a new profile type called professional profiles. Haven't seen it yet, haven't switched mine to it. Something to look at. Have you done anything on professional profiles?
I don't think it's available in the UK yet, but I think it's really interesting because obviously naturally on something like LinkedIn, you have your page versus your profile.
Yeah.
Twitter never had that kind of delineation between a company page or a profile or whatever, or a personal profile. It makes sense. There's going to be increased call to actions. Obviously, you can see here, get directions, more prevalence around contact details. So yeah, I like this as an idea, but I don't see it as game changing, I wouldn't say.
It's adding something else to our list, isn't it, really, which we don't always want to do.
Indeed.
Testing about communities, again, more features, pulling people together, because I think Twitter has quite often been an independent, individual kind of conversation platform compared to some of the others. We have groups on Facebook, we have groups on LinkedIn. So I think it's interesting how they're trying to build and be more community focused around on this. And they've been very vocal in their growth objectives as well. Oh, we've got another one. Super follows. I think we talked, we mentioned that this was coming. It is their monetization, isn't it? Would you pay to be a super follower or to get content on Twitter? It's getting closer. We're going to see some more things roll out very soon.
Yeah, exactly. I just thought I'd show this again because it's coming soon, and like this gives an example of what you would get from super following someone. So I thought I'd kind of give everyone on the call a bit of inspiration around, like, give your supporter badge, subscriber only newsletters, exclusive content, deals and discounts, and community access. So you can see how that's going to feed into that community we just spoke about, which essentially is just like Facebook groups. So you can see how these new features are starting to tie together, which is quite interesting. And this is another, so I've added, there was some new stuff from Twitter just in the last couple of days. So I'm throwing you a curveball here, Luann, because there's a couple of these you haven't seen.
Tipping people, it's that kind of buy someone a coffee, isn't it? If they've been helpful. Do we think people are going to use this? Are people going to be asking for it? Is it a way of monetizing? I don't know. I don't know if people are going to do it. I think it'd be a nice thing. Perhaps there's ways for non-profits to be using it. I think it's a wait and see.
Yeah, I'm interested in the non-profit use case, actually. And like I said in this social commerce bit at the start, like we're seeing more kind of peer-to-peer opportunities of monetization. And like for donations, I think this could be quite powerful. But we're going to see Clubhouse do a very similar thing. But yeah, now we're on to the growth objectives.
That's the one that I was expecting. So they all do their quarterly announcements, don't they? And share quite openly what they're working on. So Twitter's growth objectives, we're flying through, so I'll read this out. They are aiming to add more monetizable daily active users. And they've got stats against it and they've got time. So it's a lovely smart objective for anyone that knows that I'm slightly obsessed with smart objectives. They are also looking to double their revenue, and they're putting their bets on all these new features, spaces, fleets, communities, subscriptions, and newsletters to get them there as well. I don't think an edit button is coming for everyone that's asking for an edit button. I don't think they're ever going to do that.
No, I don't think so either. But yeah, it's encouraging to see, because we're already seeing some some growth happening again on Twitter. So yeah, it's nice to see potentially a bit of a new dawn for Twitter. Right, we're through the bulk of it, so I reckon we've got maybe 5 or 6 minutes left. So yeah, you head off to the comments and I'll cover the last few bits and bobs. So Pinterest, like the social commerce thing, Shopify partnership expanding to 27 countries. The Shopify partnership, and we've seen them roll this out just last month for Instagram and Facebook, means that if you use Shopify, it becomes a really easy way to roll out social commerce and the ability for people to buy your products across multiple social platforms. So very powerful that. Small thing from YouTube is that similar to what we've seen with Facebook and Instagram, is that they're testing hiding dislikes. I think all of these platforms are acutely aware of some of the kind of cognitive disadvantages of seeing like negative commentary, people disliking content, and trying to make social more of a positive place in general. So yeah, that's positive for me, that's for sure. So from a Snapchat perspective, like Luann mentioned earlier with Instagram, remixing, just like we've seen with duets on TikTok, which kind of popularized the format, remixing is coming to Snapchat as well. So it's interesting to see with Snapchat copying other things. Snapchat are actually looking to TikTok quite a lot at the moment in terms of their inspiration. Obviously, Snapchat Spotlight was a version of their take on TikTok, basically. So interesting. Snapchat's growth has been good, though. 280 million daily active users, 22% year over year, which predominantly has been driven from people using it via Android, which someone needs to tell Clubhouse that, I think. Onto TikTok. There's some really cool updates, actually, as TikTok, as I said, on their march to 1 billion monthly active users, introduced playlists, which operate in pretty much the same way that YouTube playlists do. If you've got content that you create that follows a similar trajectory or a theme or a topic, anyone that's ever spoken to me with any length before knows how passionate I am about like content themes and topics and having it follow a kind of linear path. So playlist helps organize that and helps guide people through, a series of content that you might be orientating towards. Also a new video editor for anyone that has done TikTok and started creating content for TikTok. You realize that one of the biggest barriers is not just about creativity, it's about the time it takes to create the content for TikTok. So they've released a video editing tool, which currently lives in their ad manager product, but is free to access. So that's quite powerful. Auto captions, nothing new here in terms of what it is and what it does, but super powerful in terms of making sure the accessibility of our content is on point. Incidentally, TikTok content is listened to with the sound on far more than any other platform. So captions have less of a relevance, but they're still important about increasing the accessibility of our content. For anyone wanting a bit of inspiration when it comes to TikTok, of which, you know, certainly I always find myself needing a bit of inspiration when it comes to, you know, how do we portray our business on a platform like TikTok? They've launched a business creative hub as a result of that. So here you can look at other businesses that are engaging on TikTok that are seeing results, looking at kind of the individuals they're engaging with, the type of themes and the hashtags they're using. So yeah, really powerful. TikTok have done a lot of useful things to help people get more creative on the platform. So yeah, all credit to them on that. As I said, like the time that people spend on TikTok is the thing that Facebook are feeling most threat about at the moment. So you know, time spent per user grew faster than nearly any other app, including 70% in the US and 80% in the UK, surpassing Facebook. So we've spoken about TikTok users, but it's that time spent on app that is the hugely valuable metric for all of these social platforms. The more people spend time on the app, the more time that these apps have to push ads to these individual feeds. So it's critical to how these platforms grow, even as critical as user growth. So yeah, TikTok's absolutely on a march at the moment. Clubhouse, they're also going down creator payments, which essentially works just like we saw with tipping on Twitter, which allows you to kind of pay individuals for whatever, right? So it might be paying to access a certain Clubhouse room, it might be paying to access exclusive content. They've kept it very deliberately broad, and I'm fascinated to see this as a trend, because even though it seems pretty basic, like, oh, right, well, I'll just pay Luann a tenner because I'll tip her for saying something good. But it's kind of like, whilst that kind of seems a bit trivial and a bit strange, it actually deliberately kept it quite an open type of use case, because we're going to see this evolve and emerge. And I think what I'm potentially predicting is that the reliance of social media channels on ads is diminishing, because if they can start to orientate more towards social commerce and driving revenues through that, and also the ability for creators on these platforms to be able to monetize their own content, which we're seeing absolutely an increasing trend of, which has been driven by platforms like Patreon or Substack, for example. That's a really interesting trend. So, but Clubhouse growth is slowing at the moment. So even though they got 4 billion valuation, which is incredibly overinflated in my view, but then what do I know? Like, but their usage and their popularity in the App Store is diminishing. So yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. And I saw this audience insight actually about like what are the communities that exist on Clubhouse, and I kind of chuckled because we saw like speaker and coach being like the top left, because that's typically most of the content that I can discover. And I think Clubhouse biggest challenge is like, they have no real algorithmic ability to serve content to you that they believe you might be interested in. Like, if you look at TikTok, it's incredibly intelligent as to how it's going to predict the content that you'll engage with. Clubhouse has none of that, and they're struggling as a result, because people are struggling to discover interesting content. But talking about Clubhouse, I've spoken about Discord before, which typically was like a gaming platform. They have 100 million daily active users, but now they've pivoted to be, to be a broader platform. So they've released Stage channels, which is their competitor to Clubhouse. Works in exactly the same way. Same with Reddit as well. They've introduced Reddit Talk, which is their competitor to Clubhouse. Kind of getting bored of saying that same thing. But starting to see like this audio trend is absolutely here to stay, that's for sure. And there, 45 minutes in, we made it. Four summary things, and then let's hit the questions. So kind of 4 things that I would say I've noticed, but I'm interested in your take on this as well.
Yeah.
So private social media networks. The future is private. I think I'm quite Mark Zuckerberg on that one, because that's a very interesting trend in general. Impending iOS update that we were speaking about, the growth of WhatsApp is more private community, and like the growth of Facebook groups, the growth of things like Patreon and Substack and those smaller communities, is that the future potentially? Audio first, and just audio in general continues to heat up, really, really hot across multiple platforms. The ability to remix content, so we saw that happening on Instagram, we've seen that happening on Snapchat, and obviously popularized by duets on TikTok. I believe that's going to be a really key content consideration. It requires quite a lot of creativity to bring it to life, but ultimately this is like inherently viral, right? Content that other people can play off. It's such an important part of what makes great content, easily shareable. So yeah, I'm going to see more and more of that. Tipping creator monetization is marketing shift away from reliance on ads. I've already spoken about this already, but how social media in general is orientating. It's less about having lots of users on the platform and just driving advertising revenue. I'm seeing a slight, very early days, but a shift away into decreasing that reliance on ads into more of the creator monetization or business monetization, which potentially will have significant upside for us as users of the platforms, because it then becomes more about organic content again. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but that's where I'm at. What do you reckon, Luann?
I think there's some really interesting things in here. So, and it's all about balance, isn't it? And time and resources as to whether you can take on new features, whether you can't do all of this. You cannot do all of this, even if you were working on it, 24/7, 7 days a week. So it's about getting that balance. And I do agree, as I said earlier, that there does need to be this balance between what you push out in public and focusing on the private conversations that will drive business, if that's why you're using it. Audio, yes. Remixing. Maybe, Andy, one day we'll get to meet face to face halfway down the M4. We'll do this by the end of the year.
That's it.
I'm really interested in the monetization and actually how people respond to this, because is it a terribly British thing to ask for money and for tips? And thank you to my friend Eric, who said that it was worth more than a tenner. But there will be this balance of, the ask, and are we comfortable with asking versus will people start giving? Will it just become a habit, as when you leave a restaurant that you give people tips? So I like the opportunity. I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out, and it could be some people don't mind asking and we see lots of it. Will that encourage us to see more value in their content, or will it switch us off from it? I think it's going to be really interesting. In terms of the content and all the things that we're talking about with these features, I think it's the underlying thing here is that we need to work really hard at this. We need to be more creative. There are no quick wins. There are no quick, I'll just bash out a post, job done for the day. We've got to spend time planning, thinking about our audience, understanding how the platforms work and the nuances, using more than one platform, because we know people use more than one platform, and working out, how to get that balance as well. So I think what we're saying is there's so many changes, and we know that it's not necessarily making our jobs easier.
It's not. But hopefully this has given you some additional context to help kind of inform your strategies a little bit. So, right. So let's go. Do we have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing.
We've got lots of thank yous and people asking each other's. The main question is, do you get a copy of the recording? And yes, we do send that out afterwards. Comments about YouTube. We'll pick these up and see if there's things that we can pull into perfect timing next month's session, which we would love you. You're already clicking on it. Thank you so much. Join us. I think is it the 27th of May?
Yeah. The final. This is always the final Thursday. So yeah, book in early, because there'll be another load of updates to come your way as well. So really hope this was useful. It's takes a long time to put together, but it's a lot of fun talking about. So so
thank you. Thank you.
Really?
Someone wants you to play a tune on your guitar. Maybe we'll do that in the TikTok. We'll combine all these requests later. No pressure. Thank you everyone for watching. You are, as Andy put in the last slide, welcome to contact either of us if you have questions in between, want to know more about Content Cal, or want some specific LinkedIn advice. That's kind of my main focus. Thank you.
Amazing. Right, thank you so much for giving up some of your time. We know how busy everyone is and so many conflicting priorities, but the fact that so many of you stayed on for the whole session, we're absolutely so grateful for it. So hope it was useful. We'll see you again, same time next month. Have a lovely holiday weekend.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.